So here's why I'd still compassionately challenge statements that are made in my work that say, well, I don't follow this influencer because of his ideas towards women, some of the politics, all that stuff. I follow this person because they motivate me to be better. They help me install like discipline, etc. I don't agree with what they say there, but I do find this particular content helpful and useful for me. I still compassionately challenge those frames and explore that frame of view, that point of view in conversation. And what I often notice in conversations or expressions that are shared in group spaces or maybe in conversations with young people is that a lot of us in the space will go, okay, whew, gosh, you had me for a second there. I'm glad that you actually don't believe in that, but you find some value in this. For me, there still needs to be some form of compassionate, curious exploration and introspection that follows that statement. Because let's be honest, there are a range of different voices online that speak to personal development, discipline, becoming the best version of yourself, that aren't adjacent to ideas, belief systems, and the perpetuation of misogyny, sexism, and violence against women and girls. Can we just state that? I think that's really important to name. But when we go, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's fine. That's cool. Okay, I can kind of see where you're coming from there. Without that compassionate, curious follow up but just out of interest, are you aware of any other people online that speak to that self discipline, that, personal development, becoming the best version of yourself, that aren't in close distance to some of the other harmful stuff that you've just rightly mentioned? That's not a disrespectful challenge. That's not a shame or blame tactic. That is an invitation for curious introspection and reflection. And often what we do is, oh, you said that you're not in proximity to X, Y, and Z, and that's great, fine. But we don't follow it up with, but do you know other people in the space? Are you familiar with different voices in the space? Is this the only person that you're hearing these ideas from? Because if it is the only person that you're hearing these ideas from, of course you want to keep that person close because you haven't heard this particular approach or this particular lens from anybody else. It feels unique to you, but there are a range of different voices online that speak to what you value that aren't in such close proximity to some of the things we're looking to challenge, some of the things we're looking to change. That is not disrespect. That is not shaming or blaming. That is curious inquiry in action. Again, as I say, often what we do in those spaces is we just take that conversation at face value and go, okay, cool. They're not in proximity to that, and they've named it that it's not something that they believe in, so that's good enough. And this isn't about not trusting young people, but it is about being aware enough and forward thinking enough to recognize that at this point in time, that might be the frame of reference and the opinion, right? But over time, that proximity, that echo chamber, that compounding of ideas, around personal development, self-development, etc., mixed in with the pervasiveness of misogyny, sexism, the looks maxing culture, the entrepreneurial hyper-capitalist sort of hyper-patriarchal culture embedded into those messages and ideas, over time might compound, impact, and influence frames of view, frames of reference. That's important to name. But often we don't enter those conversations with that curious, reflective desire to understand or seek to understand more those ideas and those belief systems. That for me is hugely, hugely important in those spaces. Because often what follows those kind of reflections from a sort of wider cultural lens is, well, they do speak about some useful things, these influencers. Most of it is awful trash, ignorant, misogynistic, sexist, vile stuff. But some of the stuff they do talk about is useful and helpful, I believe, to young people. Is often what I hear from professionals in the space, educators in the space, etc. And that ability to discern from young people, bringing that critical thinking lens in, is massively important. You can take what's useful and discard what's not. My lens on this is that, yes, take what's useful, discard what's not, but you don't need to be in context or in proximity to content and context that is, harmful and deeply pervasive and deeply influential. If you value personal development, self-actualization, becoming the best version of yourself, you do not need to get that information from those influencers that also peddle misogyny, sexism, violence against women and girls. You see where I'm coming from? Like, that nuance, that critical thinking is a great foundation to expand the worldview of that young person, expand the range of ideas or inputs from ideas that they're receiving and they're getting from. It's an opportunity to expand and hear from different voices because they've identified what's important to them. Amazing. But if we're not challenging where those ideas are coming from and the proximity to other ideas that can cause harm and can cause, bias and prejudice that is deeply, deeply problematic, then we're not doing our job, in my opinion, as well as we can in those spaces. So I wanted to come on. This is probably going to be the shortest episode, but it is something for me that is really, really important in these conversations that we have with young people specifically. If a young person is identifying something that's important to them, that's amazing, that's beautiful. But if they are talking about the fact that the young people, the people that they are engaging with, I don't like this influence, and they talk about misogyny, sexism, etc. But I do value, the personal development, self-development, becoming the best version of themselves. Great. You don't need to get that information from them, that you can go elsewhere. You do realize that, right? That conversation of, are you aware of other people in the space that talk about this? If not, go away and maybe think about and explore and expand that worldview. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Those conversations are massively important when it comes to having those critical conversations with young people, but most importantly, following up those critical conversations with further critical action. That for me is hugely important in this space and something that I feel is often missed in conversations that relate to masculinities and the influence and forces on young masculinities at this point in time. So I hope you found this episode useful. If you do, please feel free to share with those in and around you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a blessed week and that all is well in your world. And I will see you hopefully in a future episode very, very soon. Big, big blessings to you.